Welcome to the GPP Chin Music Podcast. I'm Big Italy 42 here, talking about some GPP options for you for tonight's MLB slate, the final Friday of the regular season. And as we're looking at it here, we've got a lot of elite pitchers on the mound tonight. We've got Jake Arrieta and Francisco Liriano, two guys who will be pitching, likely pitching, for their respective teams in the playoffs here coming up next week. So the interesting thing about these two guys is I guess you can call it a hunch. I'm a little bit hesitant to go all in on these guys in cash games. Not that I don't think they'll both have great games, because I think they will. I just wonder about their workload, how many pitches they're allowed to throw with the playoffs upcoming. The last thing a team like Chicago, especially, who hasn't had a deep playoff run in quite some time, is to overwork one of your guys right before the playoffs. So obviously that's anecdotal. I don't know that as absolute fact, but for me, guys like Arrieta, Syndergaard, and Liriano all going to be more of GPP plays for me, and I tend to think that this is a GPP only type of slate, just because there's a lot of uncertainty with teams that are already eliminated. There's some uncertainty with teams that are not eliminated either. So for me, I just hate investing a lot of money, bankroll, time into cash games on a slate like this, where there's just not a lot of guaranteed production from a lot of spots there. So going to be really interesting to see where everyone goes tonight. But for me, I'm loving some GPP arms. I like guys like Chris Sale. He's 11,007 on DraftKings. He's 12,000 on, he's 12,000 on FanDuel. And this is a guy that has huge strikeout upside. Hasn't been particularly great recently. Over the last 30 days, still strikeout rate of over 25%, but nowhere near his season-long rate of over 32. Giving up a ton of home runs over the last couple starts, 2.63 over the last 30 days. Give up one home run in his last start, two in the start before that, one in the start before that, three in the start before that. And that was on the heels of, the end of his 10-plus strikeout run that was just absolutely ridiculous in seemingly every game. But certainly going to be no limitations on Chris Sale. You know that. As long as he pitches well, he's going to pitch deep. And it's a Detroit team that's good against left-handed pitching, but he's had some success against them. He has monster upside. I don't think many people will be looking at him. Dallas Keuchel is another interesting one. Obviously, Houston going into the postseason here coming up pretty soon. 11-3 for him on DraftKings and 11-2 on FanDuel. This is a guy that's been in very good form, aside from that one start. Really his only bad start of the entire season. Over the last 30 days, 60.9% ground ball rate, strikeout rate of almost 30%. His swinging strike rate, 12.4. This is a guy that a lot of people thought didn't have strikeout upside. He's shown it time and time again. I love him in tournaments tonight. Trying to get away from the household names as far as tournaments go for this evening, because that's what's going to set you apart. I think Josh Tomlin's an interesting one. Had that bad start last time out against Kansas City, but prior to that, he had 7 very impressive starts all in a row, including 2 complete game performances, one against Kansas City, one against Detroit. Tonight he gets Boston. Looks like David Ortiz is going to be shut down for the season, so that's a big bat out of that Boston lineup that certainly has some weapons, but as we've seen, the reason why they're nowhere near the playoffs, they've disappeared many, many times. So I think Josh Tomlin's an interesting GPP option there as well. And then as you look at cheaper guys, mentioned this on the FanDuel podcast earlier, there's really no one that I love, but I'll look at a guy like Henry Owens because he's cheap. He's $5,900 on FanDuel. $8,000 on DraftKings I don't like quite so much, but he's a guy who has shown some upside over the last 30 days. 13% swing strike rate. Really, really impressive. 20.7% hard hit rate. Not giving up a lot of hard contact, striking out quite a few guys. Issue being with him that he is facing a Cleveland team that sees a lot of pitches. They're not great against left-handed pitching, though, so something's got to give there. I think he's an interesting cheap option, more so on FanDuel than on DraftKings. As far as these other options, I don't love many of them. Luis Severino's a guy that is okay. I just don't think he has any upside at his price. I'm really not looking at guys like Alex Wood. Alex Wood is okay, but he's just likely to throw up negative points as he is to get you, a quality start there. So I'm just not a big fan of his there in that spot. Ruby De La Rosa is the only other guy I'll consider. Another guy who's very, very up and down, but he's got a decent price tag. He's a guy that can strike out quite a few batters when he gets it going. But I just don't expect that from him. Swing strike rate still below 10% in the last 30 days. So that's going to kind of take him out. All right, let's look over here at catchers. You want to try to swerve from the crowd. Obviously, big slate here. Buster Posey going to be popular, and he should be. He'll probably still be my most used catcher because he gets Kyle Kendrick. And what a better way to end your season on the final weekend than to get to face Kyle Kendrick. So you absolutely have to like that. An interesting option will be Jonathan Lucroy if we see him back in the lineup. Maybe Jake Arrieta doesn't pitch very much. Maybe something comes out about pitch counts. I'm certainly not trying to pick on Arrieta, but if we hear something that he's only going to pitch 4 or 5 innings, you can throw in a guy that no one's going to be looking at. But I also don't think he's going to start probably. So it's a tough spot. Travis d'Arnaud is an interesting one against Gio Gonzalez. He hasn't shown power recently, but he has had power this season, especially against lefties. And as we know, Gio Gonzalez has not been great against right-handed batters. 323 WOBA allowed, below average. He's been better recently, but another one of those situations, really nothing to play for there. So you're trying to find yourself some upside where you can. Another guy with upside, Blake Swihart, had a couple of big games recently. He's shown enormous upside. He's sitting there at $2,800 on FanDuel. His DraftKings price, $3,400, not quite as much of a value, but certainly a guy that has big-time upside that you like. Another guy to consider, Wellington Castillo. Like I said, I love Dallas Keuchel. I always do. But Castillo certainly has big upside, as he always does against a lefty, especially. So I'll throw him in there as my next option there. First base options, they're absolutely loaded from top to bottom. You've got some interesting ones. Chris Davis, probably the biggest upside, I'd say, against Severino, who struggled recently. Davis coming off a couple big games there. I think that if you're looking for guys that are going to fly below the radar, I think guys like Lucas Duda in a lefty-lefty matchup, he's shown big-time upside against lefties, and he's been on a tear recently. 5 homers in his last 4 games, and that's including an 0-for-4 performance last time out. I love Prince Fielder. I don't think he'll be very low-owned, though. It's a good matchup for him against Jared Weaver, but that's an interesting option for you there. Justin Bour against Aaron Harang. Justin Bour, another one of those guys showing big-time upside. I mean, he's got 5 home runs, looks like, in his last 8 games as well. Not quite priced down where we'd like him to be, but a guy that has considerable upside for tournaments. Albert Pujols is going to be popular again. If you're playing a lot of GPP lineups, I'd still get some exposure. A guy who hasn't been hitting for average at all this season, but hitting for a ton of power. So you certainly have to throw him in there for consideration as well. Second base, I really don't like tonight. I hope that Logan Forsythe plays, and I can play him against the lefty at low ownership with that, especially that day-to-day tag listed right next to his name. That in itself going to get him some lower ownership, even if he is in the lineup. I gotta like that. Other options a second, you gotta like Brian Dozier against fly ball pitcher Chris Young. Matt Duffy, this is DraftKings specific. He's only third base eligible on FanDuel, but against Kyle Kendrick there, great spot for him. Hit a homer 2 days ago, had a huge game there. You gotta like that. Other options for you at second base, there really aren't a lot. I like D. Gordon's upside against Aaron Harang and his slow delivery. If he can get on base, he should be able to pile up stolen bases and take that title from Billy Hamilton, who's now out for the season. I like Robbie Cano as well against Aaron Brooks. Aaron Brooks has been an okay pitcher, but he has struggled with left-handed batters, so 356 WOBA in a small sample size, so that's a good spot for him. And then all the way down at the bottom, I'm looking at Colton Wong, pretty cheap on both sites as a lefty, facing off against Julio Teheran there. Third base options. Got to like Nolan Arenado in the righty matchup. He's been smashing righties all season long. He's certainly finishing strong, up to 41 homers and 127 RBI on the year. He's certainly not the reason that the Rockies are nowhere near the playoffs. Having a hell of a season, looking to end it with a bang. Miguel Sano with 2 home run upside easily against Chris Young, guy who just has a ton of power. Chris Young almost a 60% fly ball rate once again this year. Adrian Beltre at third base, Manny Machado, both those guys absolutely on fire right now. And then you got even more options. You got Evan Longoria against the lefty and Mark Burley. He homered last night. He's got extra base hits in back-to-back games. He's finishing strong. Alex Rodriguez gets a lefty and Wei-Yin Chen, who we've seen many, many times before. And then if you're looking down for cheap guys, there's really not much. I mean, there's so many good options up top that I'm looking at those. But, I mean, the one cheap guy's got to be David Freese once again. Seems like the Angels are getting a lefty every night. Seems like David Freese is producing every night as well. So he's the other option I'm looking at there. Looking at shortstop options, there's a ton of shortstop options here for you. At the top, you got Xander Bogaerts, Francisco Lindor, Carlos Correa, all the usual suspects up top. As I always do, I'm going to mention Marwin Gonzalez. He'll be hitting from the left side against Ruby De La Rosa. Certainly a preferred split, as De La Rosa has like 400 WOBA to lefties. And then I'm also looking at some other bats, I mean, I like Eduardo Escobar. He hasn't been great recently, but he's shown his upside. He's shown some power in the second half as well. Having a nice season, and people are kind of forgetting about him because he's cooled off since that hot stretch he had. So that's a good spot. Asdrubal Cabrera, another one that has pretty sizable upside that I don't think a lot of people will be on. Final guy I'm going to throw out there is Elvis Andrus. Doesn't have, double dong upside, but he's a guy that steals bases. I expect Texas to score a lot of runs. He should be in a good spot for RBIs and run production, so I like that quite a bit. Looking over at the outfield, I mean, take your pick with these top guys. Trout, Harper, I slightly prefer Trout, obviously. More to play for, much better matchup. Harper has to go against Syndergaard, which should keep his ownership low. But then guys that I think are really interesting, Charlie Blackmon and Carlos Gonzalez and Corey Dickerson even in tournaments. Chris Heston has struggled against left-handed batters this season. He went down to the minors for a little bit, 351 WOBA. That's certainly a spot where I want to pick on him as much as I can there, and I don't think that the Rockies will be highly owned. They really never are on the road. All those guys interesting, especially Corey Dickerson, who's much cheaper than I think he rightfully should be, despite the park factors there. Mookie Betts and Jackie Bradley are a couple guys I'm really considering the outfield for Boston. Both guys have big-time upside. Betts has been absolutely on fire over the past few weeks there as well. Gregory Polanco, Starling Marte, both those guys I think good options. I think McCutchen at his current price, especially on FanDuel, going to be a little higher owned than I'd like in GPPs. I like Adam Eaton. He's a little bit overpriced, but he's a guy that does have upside. He's got a nice high floor as well, and facing a pitcher in Alfredo Simon that really struggles with lefties. Nelson Cruz sitting at 44 home runs, looking to get himself a nice, strong finish to the season, get up to 45 maybe, contend for that top option, or top spot, and he's certainly in a good spot here tonight against Aaron Brooks, who gives up a lot of hard contact. Other options, Christian Yelich and Marcelo Zuna from Miami. A little bit of a partnership for them at Citizens Bank against Darren Harang. I like that spot for them as well. And then the other guys, I mean, I'm looking at Mikey Matuk against the lefty. He's been incredible against lefty since coming up. Only 96 at-bats, but 7 home runs, a triple, 5 doubles. The guy's been phenomenal recently since being called up, so I'm looking at him. Then as far as cheap options go, Alex Gordon is really cheap across the industry. You've got Brett Gardner is much cheaper than he rightfully should be. And not a whole lot of other guys that have huge upside. Talked about Jason Hayward as a guy with big upside against Julio Teheran and his struggles against lefties. I think he's probably the final guy that I'll throw into that mix. And that is going to wrap things up. This is the final GPP Chin Music podcast of the season. So thanks for hanging out with me this season. Check us out on YouTube. Lots of great NFL content, NBA, and everything else. Got one final baseball podcast tomorrow for DraftKings, so make sure you check that out as we wrap up the season, and we'll see you guys next time.